Martin Luther King Jr. had just turned 26 years old. He was, to many of these more established leaders in the community, still just a kid. He wasn't from Montgomery at all. He was from Atlanta, Georgia. Back in Atlanta, his father was probably the most well-known black minister in town. But King had just started his career as a minister, and he had come to Montgomery a few months before to minister to his first congregation ever. And so he was new to most people outside of his own small church. Until this Monday night. King electrified the crowd that night. He told them that, he said, "You know, my friends, there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. There comes a time, my friends, when people get tired of being flung across the abyss of humiliation, when they experience the bleakness of nagging despair. We are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. If we are wrong, then justice is a lie, and love has no meaning. And we are determined, here in Montgomery, to work and fight until justice runs down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Right here in Montgomery, when the history books are written, they will say, there lived a race of people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, and thereby they injected a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization. And we are going to do just that." Now think about how empowering that is to the people in the audience. We are about to inject a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization. We are about to change the world. Us, unknown people, here in the heart of the segregated South. And now, the crowd voted unanimously to continue the boycott. They formed the Montgomery Improvement Association to organize what would now be an ongoing effort. Now that, in a way, should seem weird to you, because they already had an NAACP branch here in town. But they decided from the very beginning they wanted to keep control here at the local level and not have any NAACP higher up in Harlem giving them directions on what to do. So creating their own local group ensured that it would be controlled by the local people. And they decided to put King, who had electrified the crowd on this Monday night, as the leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association. Partially because of his captivating speech that night, and partially, as sort of a secondary factor, was that there was a chance, they all believed, this could end with a nasty race riot. White people attacking black neighborhoods, angry at their desire for equality. And, of course, they would be most out to get the leader of the effort, which will now be King. And if that's the way everything goes down, well, King can leave town, right? He's not from here. He can go back to Atlanta. So there was that possibility as well. Now, this is a much bigger effort that's going to require ongoing organization and commitment from everyone. The quote you see here is from King's speech that night. Earlier in his speech than the part I said to you earlier, he said, "This boycott is the culmination of a series of unpleasant incidents over a period of years. It is an upsurging of a groundswell which has been going on for a long time. Our cup of tolerance has run over." And that, of course, is where the title of the lecture comes from. A groundswell that has been growing for a long time. The Double V campaign, the mobilization of the 30s, the Great Migration before that, W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, all the organization of Reconstruction. It's all built to this historical moment. So now, people have to figure out how to get back and forth. Black people were somewhere around 2/3 of the bus customers in Montgomery. That means the bus company was dependent on its black customers. But it also means that black people were dependent on the buses. Of course, everywhere, poor people are more likely to ride the buses, right? And in the segregated South, that's always black people who are more likely to be poor. So they now had to figure out how to get to work. Well, many walked. Sometimes in great sacrifice. We're talking 5, 8, 10, 12 miles a day back and forth. The MIA tried to organize carpools so that black people who had cars could offer lifts to those people who didn't. And, in exchange for that kindness, you'd usually give them gas money for their effort, since you'd be paying to ride a bus. Well, the police arrested people for carpooling. They said that they were operating an illegal taxi cab service, an illegal unlicensed taxi cab service. And if that sounds sort of crazy to you, well, welcome to Montgomery, Alabama. Of course, white people completely control the law. So it doesn't matter that it's absurd. He writes the tickets. So carpooling turns out not to be an option. So people walked. And they kept walking. Now ultimately, by the end of all this is going to go on for more than a year. But there was more that happened before it finally concluded. Of course, people alleged that the boycott was actually being spurred on by communist elements, which is what this cartoon is sort of making fun of. Somebody from outside must have influenced them to do it. So that same argument that we saw in Massive Resistance is deployed here. They said that this was part of a communist plot, to make people equal. When arresting people for carpooling didn't do the trick, the city, government, the police stepped up their tactics. They indicted 30 of the leaders of the boycott on conspiracy charges. Conspiracy to restrain trade. They said that what they were doing was actually a criminal conspiracy to try to destroy the bus company. By not riding the bus. And again, this should sound insane, because it is. But it's Alabama. And clearly, the authorities thought if they indicted King and Abernathy and Shuttlesworth and Parks, if they round up all these leaders, 30 in total, they think that that's going to break the will to continue among the ordinary black men and women. They thought that they could send squad cars squealing into black neighborhoods and drag these people out of their houses in handcuffs. It was at this point that Bayard Rustin arrived in Montgomery. Rustin, you should remember, was one of the organizers of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, that civil rights group that had been formed back in World War II. Rustin, of course, was so deeply influenced by Gandhi, as we talked about earlier. And Gandhi would have done what Rustin now urged King to do, which was turn yourself in. They're not arresting you for anything legitimate. Of course, it's BS. But you submit. Submit to that unjust arrest. Show them that you have no fear of their jail cells, their courts, and their laws, that you are willing to suffer for freedom. And so, here are King and Abernathy on their way to the police station to turn themselves in. And one by one, in ones and twos, the leaders of the boycott went down to the police station and said, "Here I am." And as they did, a crowd of black people gathered outside the police station and started cheering for leaders when they would show up to be arrested. Police stations in Alabama are not where black people usually hang out. And so to be outside that police station, in a group, applauding for your brave leaders, was helping to break down the fear. The fear. So this didn't work. So people just submit and get arrested. And what they're starting to do here is flip the meaning of being arrested. Being arrested is often something you're ashamed of. You did something wrong. You got arrested. But here, they wear their arrests like badges of honor because they know, and the other people in the community know, they didn't do anything wrong. They were arrested for justice. They were arrested for standing up for freedom. Rosa Parks, unintimidated. Joanne Robinson, King. No sense of, I got myself in trouble. So now, terrorists in Montgomery turned to violence. Churches were bombed. Homes were bombed. In fact, almost every leader of the boycott who I've told you about had their house bombed. And of course, these crimes aren't really investigated. Nobody's going to be arrested, much less punished. When King's home was bombed, he was at a church organizing the boycott, and he gets a phone call that his house was bombed. His family was right inside the living room, his wife and young kids, and they're actually fine, but he's not sure of that when he jumps into his car and drives home. And when he gets to his house, a crowd of black people had gathered in his yard. And they're pissed. Some of them have sticks and rocks and bricks. And some are talking about revenge. Because it's not the first bombing. And they know it's not going to be solved. They know there will be no justice. There are actually policemen on the scene. Well, sort of. They're across the street from King's house, leaning against their squad car, sort of just watching, smoking cigarettes and laughing with each other. So King realizes this is a tense, combustible situation. He runs into his house, checks on his wife and kids, comes back out onto his porch, which was still smoldering as he addressed this assembled crowd. And he said, "Don't get your weapons. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Remember, that is what God said. And I'm not telling you something I don't live. There's not a day that goes by that somebody doesn't tell me that the Klan is rioting here in Montgomery, or that I might be killed the next place that I move. But I don't have guns in my pockets. I don't have guards by my side. I have the God of the universe on my side. And I'm serious about that. I can walk the streets of Montgomery without fear. They can kill my body, but they can never kill the spirit of freedom that is in my people." And what do people do with their sticks and bricks? They drop them. Because that is what you call leadership. King got people to follow him in a non-violent movement because he made it clear he was willing to offer up his own life. And if you think about what he just said there, willing to offer up the lives of his wife and children. and still remain committed to nonviolence, to loving the people who wanted to kill him.